We're ready.
Okay. So just in brief, my real role here is just to help to create a forum and hold space for folks to have the conversations that we want to have. So my plan really is to just, introduce initially Mahogany, who's our regional social equity ambassador. And for those of you who don't know her, because I imagine many of you do, and let Mahogany run with it as she does so well. So, I'll just say it again, and that is that, our company supports our efforts, and then more locally as a region, I have an idea and a commitment that will be a standout. Los Angeles is a very unique place. It gives us the opportunity to represent diverse communities in a way that other offices and cities don't have. So I think it is important for us to be leaders. In addition, while knowing that our efforts to see through social equity, can and should run through all industries, that real estate in particular, it's by definition where we create our homes and create our community, is again, gives us the opportunity to be a leading edge. So with that, I'll just say that I'm delighted to work with Mahogany and the folks on this panel as well, and all of you, to have this conversation and also create space for it, but create a format and a platform for action. Mahogany's been with KW for 17 years, which is, I'll have to go back and we'll have to compare dates, because maybe we're like right there. One of the two of us is with the company a few months longer, but it has enormous experience, including being being the first Black woman vice president of the Atlanta Board of Realtors in its 100-year history, which is super cool. And and in that capacity, really integrating the Atlanta Board of Realtors with some of the other organizations that were just like NAREB, which at that time was really groundbreaking. So with that, I think I'll just turn it over to you, Mahogany. But thank you all so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. And I know you are extremely modest, but I think it's important that as a task force that we say publicly thank you for supporting, which is the mission of all of us that volunteer our times on a regular basis to really move forth the conversation, as well as change the narrative and open up opportunities, and the understanding that Keller Williams and really a career in real estate does present opportunities for anyone, regardless of their color, their orientation, their gender, and all of that. And it's the conversation of the moment, though, that is so critical. And you have been lockstep from the very beginning. You show up for meetings with us, so you don't just say, go do it. You're right there as a participant champion. So thank you. As well as, before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that we do have a full task force, agents just like all of you, that on a bi-weekly basis, rather, we get together and we're really working hard. It's a volunteer situation. It is a passion project for all of us. And while it may be just a few of us on the committee, we're looking to amplify all of your voices. And I'll just put a little commercial in that if after we finish this conversation and you feel compelled to actually take action and to step in and really be part of the workforce to change things, then definitely reach out to the region, your region, and let's talk about having you on the task force, whether it's market center level or regional level, because we need folks, okay? So with that said, I also want to thank everyone who has logged on to listen to and be open and receptive to this conversation. And the conversation about social equity really can go a lot of different ways, right? Our decision or our energy on this conversation today is to leave you with a couple of points. Number one, to have more awareness. And number two, hopefully with that awareness increases your sensitivity, right? Because like Paul said, it's about action. This is the first in several conversations continuing to discuss what we need to do. So we thank you for being here. You already know who I am. I'm at Keller Williams Inglewood, the productivity coach there, but more importantly, I'm an agent who is proud that my company supports this conversation. With that said, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to have you continue to be engaged with us, a couple of poll questions throughout, so you don't fall asleep. And then the panelists that you see with us are going to help usher this conversation through. So we're going to start with some foundational information so we all have the same kind of understanding. I would imagine that some of the initial information you probably have never heard before, and that's great, because that's how we start the conversation, with being open and understanding. We will have our panelist, Anthony Rollins. He's going to share a specific happening in a specific area. However, it's not germane to just the area that he's talking about. It's what's happening all over Los Angeles. And remember, the title is Race in Real Estate, How It Affects Your Business. So he's going to help to really start to have the conversation rooted and grounded in why should all of us care what's happening and what's happening specifically in Los Angeles. And then we will have the privilege and the honor and the pleasure to have a conversation with two of our peers that will just share some insights. So watch your screen, please participate in the poll questions. It helps us understand what you know and then what we can do moving forward. And with that said, the first poll question, AJ, put it up for me, please. It is, have you experienced or witnessed discrimination towards your clients or yourself? Have you had that at all happen?
Okay, one thing I will say is when I launch this poll, only you may have to answer all of the questions, but just answer that the first one's the one that matters. The other questions we'll do after. Yeah. I mistakenly put them together.
Okay, perfect. So just the first one. Have you experienced or witnessed discrimination? And in 5 seconds, AJ will close the poll for us. Okay,
can
AJ.
You comment in the chat to make sure you're, okay, there we go. Getting some votes.
Yeah. And then you can close it, and then we'll start with our video.
I'm gonna give it another minute just because we've only got about 4 responses so far.
Okay.
They're coming in now.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Please vote. For whatever reason, I tried to vote, but it said the panelists are not allowed to vote. So
no, we can't. Okay.
Let me give it just another 30 more seconds.
Okay.
RC Sanders, answer the question.
Yeah. Go ahead and close the poll and we'll figure out what's going on, because we can just talk through the questions. Okay, so, okay, we did that. All right, so over 50% of participants today have either witnessed or experienced it. Okay, so we have general understanding. AJ, if you could start the video for us. Just gonna give us a little historical background.
We've left untouched the biggest segregation of all that overwhelms everything else and hangs over our entire society, and that is that every metropolitan area in this country is residentially segregated. I've lived in many of them. There are clearly defined areas in every one that I've lived in that are all white or mostly white, or all African American and mostly African American. And all of us accept this as part of the natural environment. It's not we think it's a good thing. We know we say it's too bad, but we think it's sort of natural, normal, something we accept. It's not that we've tried to do anything about it and have failed. We've never even tried. And so in order to rationalize to ourselves our failure to undo it, we've adopted the national myth. And that myth is pervasive. It's pervasive across the political spectrum. The liberals and conservatives hold it. The blacks and whites hold it. The name of that myth is we have de facto segregation. Not something that was created by government like all the other segregations that we undid in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, but this is something that sort of just happened by accident. It happened because people like to live with each other of the same race. Or it happened because private actors, whether they were real estate agents or bankers or private citizens, discriminated in how they sold or rented homes. Or it happened because African Americans happen to be poorer than whites on average, and therefore they can't afford to move to middle-class communities. De facto segregation is an utter myth. There is no basis to it whatsoever. The racial segregation in every metropolitan area in this country was created by racially explicit government policy designed to create racial boundaries, designed to ensure that African Americans and whites could not live near one another, with policies that are so powerful that they still determine the racial landscape that we see in cities all over the country. Just like we have the myth of de facto segregation, we also think we know what public housing is. It's a place where poor people live, where lots of mothers with children, single parents with children, lots of young men without access to jobs in the formal economy, acting out, engaging in oppositional behavior that attracts attention to the police and a cycle of violence that we've seen in so many places. That's what we think of as public housing. But that's not how public housing began in this country. Public housing began in this country as a program for middle-class, working-class families. During the Depression, poor people were not permitted into public housing when public housing was first created. There was a housing shortage, and public housing was created for people who could afford to pay the full rent in housing, and they did in public housing, but for whom there was no housing available. Everywhere, the Public Works Administration and the other federal agencies that succeeded it created segregated public housing, separate projects for African Americans and whites in cities all across the country, frequently segregating neighborhoods that hadn't previously been segregated, that were integrated. During World War II, the actions of the government intensified to create segregation. They intensified because throughout the country, hundreds of thousands of workers flocked to centers of defense production, of war production, to take jobs that hadn't existed during the Depression. And the migration of workers into centers of defense production overwhelmed frequently the communities where they were working. The federal government had to build housing for these workers if it wanted the ships to be produced. For the African Americans, they built the housing on temporary housing because the explicit goal of the housing was that African Americans after World War II would leave and go back to the South. So they built temporary housing for the African Americans along the railroad tracks and near the shipyards. And they built more stable housing for the white migrants in the white residential areas. Very soon after that, in the mid-1950s, a development occurred everywhere in the country, which was systematic, similar, and widespread. And that was that suddenly, all the white projects began to develop large numbers of vacancies. All the black projects began to develop long waiting lists. And soon the situation became so untenable, so conspicuous. You couldn't have projects in the same city, some of which were virtually empty, and the other of which had long waiting lists. The federal government and local housing agencies opened up all projects to African Americans. And then at about the same time, industry left the cities. Fewer and fewer jobs became available to the now increasingly and soon almost all African American population in the public housing. The population could no longer afford to pay the full cost of its rent, so the government had to begin subsidizing public housing. Maintenance declined in the projects. Prior to this, maintenance workers lived in the projects. They were paid good salaries and lived in the projects. Upkeep declined. the projects became vertical slums that we came to associate with public housing today. Another federal program that was perhaps even more powerful in creating racial segregation, and that was a program of the Federal Housing Administration designed to move white families out of urban areas into single-family homes in the suburbs. At a racially explicit basis, we created a white noose around every urban area with federally subsidized single-family home subdivisions. These were giant subdivisions in many cases. The most famous of them, I'm sure you've heard of it, is Levittown, east of New York City. 17,000 homes in one place. What bank would be crazy enough to lend a developer the money to build 17,000 homes or 15,000 homes in one place for which he had no buyers? We were in a suburban country at that time. People thought the whole idea was lunacy. Who's going to want to live in a single-family home when they can live in the city instead? Any of these developers, the only way they could get the capital to build these giant subdivisions was by going to the Federal Housing Administration, submitting their plans for the development, for approval of the construction materials they were going to use, the architectural design, the layout of the streets in the subdivision, and an explicit commitment not to sell a home to an African American, required by the Federal Housing Administration. The Federal Housing Administration even required, as a condition of these guarantees, developers like Levitt to place a clause in the deed of every home prohibiting resale to African Americans or rental to African Americans. These deeds still exist in these homes today. They're no longer enforced, no longer enforceable, but they're still there. What was the consequence of this? Well, those homes in those days, in all of these suburbs, they sold for $10,000 or less, $8,000, $9,000 a piece. In today's money, that's less than $100,000, probably $90,000. African Americans who were prohibited, not that they didn't want to, not because they didn't like living among whites, they were prohibited from moving into these suburbs, and they could easily afford to do so. Any working class family can afford to buy a home for $90,000, roughly twice national median income. Those homes and developments like that now sell for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and more. The white families over the next couple of generations gained, you can do the arithmetic, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in equity. They used that equity to send their children to college, to take care of medical emergencies, to take care of economic downturns, most importantly, to bequeath it to their children, who then had down payments for their own homes. African Americans who accumulated none of that wealth as a result of this federal subsidy had none of those abilities. Today, nationwide, African American incomes are on average about 60% of white incomes. African American wealth today is 10% of white wealth. That enormous disparity between a 60% income ratio and a 10% wealth ratio is entirely attributable to unconstitutional federal housing policy practiced in the mid-20th century that has never been remedied. It's a constitutional violation, and of course it determines the ongoing racial inequalities we have today.
Well, is that the end of the video? Yes. So, AJ, we'll just hold off on the poll questions to the very end since they're all together. And I'll just
They're
post.
not together. The rest are not together. They're all separate now.
They're all separate now? Oh, awesome. Well, then give me that first one. Let's ask them, what did you know about the history of housing discrimination prior to the video?
Yeah, see that?
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, answers coming in much quicker now.
You're a magician. We thank you.
Give it another 10 more seconds and then I'll share it.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. Okay. And just because, you know, he mentioned it about Federal Housing Administration, and there's some interesting elements going on right now, even in Los Angeles, when we're negotiating on behalf of our clients, let's get that second part 2 question up, please, AJ. And you just, as he's doing that, you ask yourself, what is your view of the FHA loan? Just remember, this is totally anonymous, just really curious, you know. And we didn't, we don't have another question directly about it, but I'll ask you to think about it. If you had a less than favorable view of the FHA loan, or maybe just this information of the background that we just shared might have at least implored you to think a little differently about it, you know, would be interesting, kind of as a conversation with yourself. A couple more seconds. AJ, are we getting answers on this poll question?
Yeah, it's still moving. Once it moves, there we go.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. So the whole point of showing that video, and there's been some questions about will it be available? I believe AJ actually put the link inside the chat. Feel free to extract that, save that, share that, because I think it's important to have that. And with that video and kind of showing some of the history of housing discrimination, it lays perfectly the foundation for really the information that Mr. Rollins is going to share with us. Anthony is a colleague with KW Santa Monica. And I don't quite know how long you've been with Santa Monica, but I'm thinking for a while there, I think we might kind of be old heads together. Would that be true?
It'll actually be 13 years on December 10th.
You're a baby. Anyway, so, but with that said, you know, again, understanding the first part of affecting real estate and wealth building opportunities, we've laid that format. And now just Anthony's going to share with us just a case study, we're calling it, about a particular area. And I think it'll open up your minds to look at the greater Los Angeles in its whole, just based on what he shares with us. So as you're ready, Mr. Rollins.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mahogany. I don't know about you all, but for me, you know, that was the third time that I've seen that video, and each subsequent time it has become more and more sobering to me. And as a Black man, it triggers all sorts of emotions inside of me that leave me feeling somewhere in between feeling like I was just punched in the gut or kicked in the teeth. And, you know, as a Black man, it's an example of what I would like to say we experience on an ongoing basis. There are always constant reminders in our day-to-day life that force us to realize that we are looked at differently, we are thought of differently, and we have been treated throughout history differently. And those are all the things that we, or I as myself, a Black man, carry with me as I go through life every single day, doing everything that everyone else does. So that's the extra baggage that unfortunately I'm not allowed to check. I have to carry that with me each and every step that I take. And yet, by understanding the truth of our past, only in doing that are we truly able to confront our present with a greater effort to better understand our future. So in better understanding our past at the local level, I'd like to share with you some information regarding the history of race and real estate in Los Angeles in our spotlight neighborhood of Ladera Heights. And yet before I start, I want to share with you a few facts about the present state of race in real estate and its effects on home values from a couple of recent studies that I found online. The first one was from the Brookings Institution, and they came out with a study in November of 2018 titled The Devaluation of Assets in Black Neighborhoods. And what they determined was that majority Black neighborhoods hold $609 billion in owner-occupied housing assets. They went on to say that homes in neighborhoods where the share of the population is 50% Black are valued at roughly half the price as homes in neighborhoods with no Black residents. And they also said that homes of similar quality in neighborhoods with similar amenities are worth 23% less in majority Black neighborhoods compared to those with very few or no Black residents. And that actually came out to be on average about $48,000 per home, amounting to a $156 billion of cumulative losses. Now, the second study was from Rice Kinder, the Institute for Urban Research, and their article on race and home values that came out just in September of this year concluded that white families have on average 20 times more wealth than Black families, with racial inequalities being noted as a key reason why. And what their findings discovered was that home appreciation in white neighborhoods outpaced that of Black neighborhoods by an average of $200,000 from 1980 to 2015. So, you know, we asked the question, how important is home appreciation? And just as the video told us, you know, when your home appreciates in value, your wealth increases. And this is what enables us to fund our retirement, fund your children's college education, pay for unexpected expenses like large medical bills, or even be in the financial position to afford health insurance in the first place. In the end, when there's a gap in this wealth in between racial makeup, it leads to a gap in the number of life options for those who have to experience it. And as we know, you know, money is good for the good that it can do. And when you have more money, you have more options. And when you have less, you have less. And that is definitely something that continues to broaden that gap. Now here at KW, when we assess the needs of a potential recruit, we conduct what we call a gap analysis, whereby in understanding where the person is and where they'd like to be, we help them to identify where that gap is, and then using KW systems and models, we show them how we can effectively fill in those gaps and give them a more complete life. As we continue to have this conversation around social equity, we can actually use this same model in approaching how we would fill in the many gaps of social equity that exist, including the one created by race and real estate. Now let's take a look at how this has played out at the local level. And our spotlight neighborhood is Ladera Heights. And I'm going to show you quickly where Ladera Heights is located for all of you who may not know. So this is Ladera Heights. And Ladera Heights is basically located in between the 90 freeway and La Cienega Boulevard. And it is separated from Upper Ladera and Lower Ladera by Slauson Boulevard. This little area here, just south of Slauson and east of La Cienega, is called Old Ladera. Now, Ladera Heights originated in the 1940s in what we now know as Old Ladera. In the 1960s, custom homes were built in what we know to be Upper and Lower Ladera Heights. And these homes were designed by some of the most prominent architects of their time, including Gallant, Homer Valentine, Charles A. Wong, who designed several of the flat-roofed mid-century homes in the area, and Robert Earl, whose many clients included LA celebrities and professional sports figures like Madonna, Nancy Sinatra, Sylvester Stallone, Robert Kardashian, Barron Hilton, and Warren Beatty, amongst dozens of others. In fact, Earl was so highly touted and recommended that Donald Trump himself asked him to design estate homes for the Trump International Golf Course in Ranchos Palos Verdes. Unofficially named the Black Beverly Hills because of its concentration of upper middle class African Americans, Ladera Heights ranks number 3 in the top 10 of richest Black communities in the US. And until 1948, African Americans could not buy homes in Old Ladera or other affluent communities across America due to the racial housing covenants and the Jim Crow laws as mentioned in the video. Now, this kept Ladera Heights an upper middle class white neighborhood until the 60s, when Black doctors, lawyers, and businessmen began buying homes in the area. In the early 70s, the migration of Black residents led to white flight, where white residents would leave neighborhoods in fear that incoming Black neighbors would bring crime and lower property values. And by the early 80s, Ladera Heights had become a 90% plus African-American neighborhood. Now, what I want to do is share with you this slide that's going to give us an indication of how the home values in that area have been affected. Okay, just bear with me here. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think we have it. Okay, so what this slide shows here is basically the last 12 months rolling average cost per square foot of homes sold in Palms Mar Vista, Culver City, and Ladera Heights. And what we can see is that Ladera Heights has sold on average at $635 per square foot versus $906 per square foot in Culver City, which is a 37% less value and 42% less than homes that have sold in Palms Mar Vista, which have averaged $966 a square foot. So some of you may be asking yourself, well, you know, this is great information to know, and yet why should it matter to me? And how does this affect us as agents in Los Angeles? And going back to the 2 words that Mahogany referenced earlier on, I would say that the answer starts with those 2 words of awareness and sensitivity. So as the value of real estate continues to rise throughout LA, what we're seeing is that buyers and agents are now having to consider looking at properties in neighborhoods where they wouldn't have previously considered due to their affordability. And this often occurs in Black neighborhoods like Ladera Heights, View Park, Baldwin Hills, and the city of Inglewood, where because the areas themselves are predominantly Black, the home values are lower. And now due to these attractive values, the same group of residents who left in white flight are finding themselves wanting to move back into the neighborhood because it's what their budget affords them. And this has and continues to be accepted with mixed emotions from the existing residents, and oftentimes leads to honest, yet sometimes difficult conversations with those agents who service these communities. So having an awareness in the history of what has occurred and the present that exists leads to a greater sensitivity and understanding. And as we know, with greater sensitivity comes deeper and more meaningful communication, both of which can help to move the needle towards a better understanding of not only those affected, but of ourselves too. Now, to further this high-level conversation, I am going to turn it back over to Ms. Mahogany.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It takes a lot to really break down and understand the reason why things are happening today, right? I want to add to what you shared, because you're absolutely right. Again, it's about awareness and sensitivity. Here's where it really matters for us, particularly in Los Angeles. While we did the neighborhood spotlight on Ladera, there are many pockets and areas that are experiencing a similar situation right now, right? They're considered affordable, the prices are lower, and you're finding yourself perhaps going into areas that ordinarily would not have been your focus, your niche as an agent. Remember, though, that aside from our personal emotions or our feelings about any particular part of this subject, we are members of the National Association of Realtors, and we are held to a standard that requires that we are always mindful of fair housing in our conversations, no matter how casual they may be, whether we're representing the sellers or the residents in these areas we're talking about, or we're introducing these areas to our clients. So just that basic kind of rhythm, emotion that's happening in real estate, and the migration and the inner kind of changing the fabric of different neighborhoods, we're thrust in the middle of that every day by the way in which we do our job, and we need to be mindful. We don't need to be scared about it, but we need to be mindful. So it really does matter that we understand those areas. Now, here's a portion that I'm looking forward to. You know, we've talked about the history, we brought some more statistical data about areas. Here's where it gets really personal and human. Sharing experiences or hearing about experiences from agents, our colleagues that are doing the job or attempting to do the job that each and every one of us do every day. It would be false if I tried to act like being an agent of color is not a part of that experience. And I think that we have two colleagues, local colleagues, that can actually share and give their experiences and perspectives even better than I can. We had really robust conversations. I'm looking forward to our conversation now with the hopes that it will generate, again, greater sense of awareness, greater sense of understanding. I do think, AJ, did I skip a poll? I think I had another poll question.
Let's see.
No, I didn't. Yeah, no, I didn't.
We have one poll left, and then the final poll is more of just of a put in the chat box or thought question.
Okay, then that is so we have a third poll question? Possibly. Okay, so, but let me introduce to you two really outstanding agents that we can call our colleagues in Los Angeles. The first is Miss Tanya Williams. She represents KW Glendale, and I see she has lots of friends and family in the audience, if you will, the Glendale family. And while she probably has had the least amount of tenure with KW, like 6 years, I think it is, certainly know that when she came to this career in real estate, she came with a ridiculously impressive background and experience in areas that, and I'll let her tell about it, that we wish we had, right? Marketing, like Fortune 500 companies, like, you know, this is not somebody that just, oh, I get a license because they said it's sexy on HGTV. She really brought a lot of skill and background to bear, you know, in our community. And then we have Mr. Rashad Winston with KW Burbank. Again, another area I never drive. Now he has been with Keller Williams, let's see, You've been in the business 15 years, right? And then interestingly, started with KW, was on his own for a little bit, and he's been back with Keller Williams now about 5 years, I think you shared.
I've been with KW total about 7 years.
Okay, see.
Back to KW Burbank recently. I came back right after the pandemic started, actually.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I've happened in my own office for 3 years.
Okay, so, and I mentioned that because again, you know, when we're having these conversations, it also matters the context in which people are bringing their experiences to it. Both of our panelists are parents of beautiful and amazing children. They'll tell you that. That's what I heard. That's what they told me. And again, because we're different people, we have different experiences, I just want to just start to have a conversation. You guys are listening in, and feel free, if you think of something, type in the chat box. If you have a question for at the end, we're going to leave it open to kind of address this and let everybody chime in. But I'll start with Rashad, because we talked at length. We spoke at length about some experiences you've had in what most agents would think basic activities of the job, right? Like what stood out for me was when you shared about door knocking. Share about your door knocking experience.
I'm not a fan of door knocking, just throw that out there. But the main reason why I chose not to do it, honestly, is because of the color of my skin and where I market. Most of my colleagues probably don't have to deal with the concern of wondering if homeowners decide if you belong in that neighborhood. You know, if I knock on a door, it's common practice to step back 2 or 3 feet from that door after I knock or ring the doorbell, so that I don't appear threatening to the homeowner, not only as a man, but as a Black man. So that, you know, that's one of the reasons why I don't door knock. But there's a particular experience I want to share that I spoke, you know, Mahogany and I spoke about. I was door knocking in Encino, ironically, and knocked on the door. It was an expired listing, and she comes to the door and is talking to me through the glass window of the door. And I chalked it up to, okay, she just doesn't know who I am. And she's starting to ask me a ton of questions, and I'm at the door for about 10 minutes. And then she finally opens the door. And, you know, we had a long conversation. Haven't seen or talked to this woman since, but what I took from that was, the initial element was, okay, there's this man I don't know knocking at my door, and, you know, why is he here? At the time, I didn't think color played a factor, but in thinking about it and talking to other people and then learning more about Encino, that's exactly why she didn't open the door, until she realized I wasn't a threat. And so that is just one of many things as an agent, as a Black agent, that I have to think about.
Right. And it's, as you and I were talking about this experience, you know, it's not uncommon for our brokers, our coaches, our team leaders, or what have you. Like, that's one of the things that they tell us to do to generate business. And, you know, if we say we don't want to, you know, for those who have not experienced it, you know, it's an opportunity to understand, maybe it's not that we don't want to, it's that it's this circle of maybe not being safe that kind of envelopes that. But I don't want to miss something that part of your story, as simple as it is, something happened in that exchange that further illuminates why we're doing what we're doing. You took that opportunity to try it. Initially, the homeowner would not, you said, would not open the door until she realized, or she then ascertained, you're not a threat, right? Mm-hmm. So in that moment, she allowed herself to be open and receptive, the same way you allowed yourself to stand there and be open and receptive and still engage with her after, at first, there was discrimination, Did I hear that right?
Yes, you did.
Which is, it circles back to why we keep having these conversations. We have to have that openness from both sides, right? Did you ever door knock after that?
I did. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is lost is that, a lot of my colleagues that don't look like me in the summer when it's triple digits, they're out there door knocking. They're in shorts and tutus, sports cap, and they're out there doing their thing and more power to them. And I've actually had this conversation before as to why I just did not door knock in the summer, is because I can't go out in those neighborhoods, Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Encino, neighborhoods that have residents that don't look like me. I can't be in tennis shoes, a sports cap, casual clothing, because I have to make it clear that I'm a professional. I have purpose for being in that neighborhood. And, who wants to be in a long sleeve shirt, slacks, and dress shoes when it's, triple digits? And the few times that I did, when people open the door, I'm drenched in sweat. So, how professional does that look?
It has a whole another look at that point that we worry about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about at length, you and I, about even the notion of attire is a bigger issue than maybe a lot of agents who are not Black and in real estate may not have to really think about. Of course, the average person wants to look nice and feel like they look good when they leave their home. We have another layer of understanding that or preparation that has to happen, right?
Mhm.
With that. Okay, it is interesting with Tanya, Miss Williams. Now, we didn't have that type of experience in our conversation from you. You had actually an experience that was more recent, right? With that association. Could you share with us that experience? I know we have a couple to go through, but these are the ones that really illuminated for me.
Right. Thank you very much. I guess that we're just going to turn it just a little, but I can definitely relate to Rashad as well, even as a Black female. And just going out door knocking, I choose not to door knock as well because the experiences I have had as a female knocking on doors and people really not letting you have a full conversation. Now, of course, as many Black people, and actually just race in general, you kind of know and you get a feel when someone is looking at you differently and having maybe a fear because of your race and sometimes religion as well. But Mahogany, yes, let me switch over to what the most recent thing that we spoke about, which was I am a member of the association, the Glendale Association, and a proud member of the Glendale Association of Realtors. And as everyone is aware, which has been going on within the last several months with the hashtag Black Lives Matter, which it has been a heated discussion for many and a very hard conversation and feeling for others as well. So with our association, I was on their website and I looked and I saw the hashtag Every Member Matters. And when I saw that, I sunk. I felt a sense of hurt. I felt a sense of, I was offended. I was let down. And I just said, wow. The air in my whole body collapsed. Now, I'm going to read everyone. We're talking about sensitivity. What the word in the dictionary, when it says sensitivity, what it means. It says a person feeling which might be easily offended or hurt. A person's feeling which might be easily offended or hurt. I felt all those things when I saw every member matters. Now, in the whole scheme of things, everybody matters, and we all know this. So when I saw that, my first thing was, let me call the owners of Glendale office and let him know that how I felt, and also that I was going to reach out to not just the president of the Glendale Association, but the CEO of Glendale Association, and tell him exactly how I felt. But out of respect for the owners, I said, let me give him heads up and just kind of talk through it with him, which was well received. So moving ahead, this long conversation, now, just so everyone understand, now we all know how the hashtag of Black Lives Matter, and that, that it is truly about change. It's not about anything else. And what all the marches was about change, and everybody matters. And when talking to the CEO of the Glendale Association, I told him that with the hashtag Every Member Matters, it kind of cartoon and kind of diluted the true meaning of what everyone in all 50 states was out there marching and talking about. Our conversation was so intense and so wonderful that he was on vacation actually, and he called me back and we're talking probably over an hour. And after how I explained that every member matters was pretty offensive, he wrote me this letter, and I'm going to quickly read it to you. He said, "Hi, Tanya. Thank you for your time on the phone today. I very much appreciate your feedback on our marketing, language, and website. We have removed the word every member matters from our site and from future emails and marketing pieces. Please feel free to check the computer and any devices to make sure that phrase is completely gone. If it still shows up anywhere within our communications, please let me know so I can make sure it is removed." And he also said, "I am grateful for our conversation today, and I assure you that this discussion will continue. I am fully committed to diversity in our industry and the community, and I want to dedicate our association resources to promoting and celebrating our diversity. Stay tuned for upcoming opportunities later this year and into the next year, including special panels, events, and bias training. I am also open to any suggestions that you have in promoting diversity, and happy to discuss it in length with you or any other agents in your office." And this letter came from David Kissinger. So I'm saying this to say that sometimes people are not aware of what could and is offensive. So, as I said, I thank him for this, and it opened up the door for change. And that's what we're here today for, just to talk about change and moving the needle just a little more and opening minds for possibly small biases that someone has had in the past, whether it's wanting to hire a realtor, as simple as that. I mean, because as we know, people will hire or not hire you as a realtor for many reasons, whether you have short hair, long hair, curly hair, or yes, if you're Black. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mahogany.
Oh, thank you for that. And I want to tie the similarities in the situation, because it seems like when she went from 1 to 10, it doesn't make sense. Here's the commonality that I heard when I spoke with you guys, and I think it's critical to understand. At the very, very core, number one was a willingness to speak on it. And, you know, particularly as, you know, growing up Black in America of a certain age, don't concern yourself. You know, sometimes the burden of explanation or being the one to explain is heavy, right? It's not uncommon to be put in that position. It is what it is, or as I like to tell my clients, we're here now, right? But that willingness and still having a spirit of wanting to bridge the gap, right? Coming from, like you address them, coming from curiosity, coming from understanding, coming from offering an opportunity for awareness and seeing that we're all human is how change in those situations happened, right? And so it still goes to the basic human core, the willingness to call it out, and we can call it out without acting out. Right? But definitely call and hold people accountable. We can do that, but also be willingness and open to receive someone saying, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think about it like that. Oh, okay. And that, even though it's two different experiences, that was the common thread I heard in terms of a resolution that really ended what started as not so groovy, not so positive. When you tell the story, you can tell it with a positive bow on it, right? So thank you for that. I want to turn back to Rashad. We talked about a number of other things that we do as real estate agents that seem pretty mundane, seem pretty whatever in average. However, skin tone can change the experience, right? If it's not ringing a bell right now, I'll remind you. Remember we talked about showing property. What's that experience like? So you definitely had a perspective on that.
If I can, I want to go back briefly to the door knocking element that'll actually tie into
my
answer to your question. One of the things that we're taught as KW agents and just as good business people is leverage of people's time. Mm-hmm. And so with that lesson, as well as trying to leave a legacy, you want to, if you have kids, especially, teenagers, they spend most of your money. So you want their help in earning it. And so I've heard, other colleagues, putting their kids to work. And one of the easiest things I can have my teenage son do is go out and do something I don't want to do, door knock, or just drop off the flyers. Pre-COVID, obviously. But that's something I can't do because my son is Black. And the reason for that is because if someone in that neighborhood deems him out of place, I'm not sure how the homeowners are going to react, or most importantly, I'm sorry, law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's sad to have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm. It's scary. It's
extremely,
scary.
Extremely, and obviously upsetting.
Yeah.
Let me chime in, just so everyone is quite aware that, and Rashad, I thank you. this is a heavy subject. And I see how Rashad is heavy in you just speaking on it. And I just want everyone to be really aware of it. It's a soul, it's in the soul when we're speaking. Okay.
It's very heavy. So thank you for pointing that out, Tanya. The other elements of us generating businesses, open houses, which, I mean, most of us are hurting right now in that element because we can't do it. But that has always been a primary source of business for me. And so if it's not a listing that I have, I reach out to colleagues and, you know, that may have an active listing and ask if I can sit an open house for them. And in talking with Mahogany, there was one particular experience where a guy, I've set houses for him dozens of times. I ask for it. He sends a response, what time, what day. I send it to him. Okay. This particular time, same routine, but then he asked for me to send him some marketing material with my photo on it. And because him and I have a relationship, didn't think anything of it. High-end listing. He responds to me about 10 or 15 minutes later, and his response is, my clients don't think I'm the right person to sit the open house. My kind, specifically, my kind aren't the right, you know, isn't the right type to sit the open house. And I didn't question the agent at all because him and I have a relationship, and I know for a fact it wasn't him. And quite honestly, he was mortified by having to tell me. And I appreciated his honesty, but it's just one of those things that, you know, I was telling Mahogany on that particular day, I'm not an emotional person. My wife would tell you that I was, you know, I am as I get older, but she would tell me I was Tin Man. I don't cry. That particular day, and Mahogany, I forgot to mention this to you, this element of it. That particular day was just kind of really heavy. There was a report in the news of another unarmed Black man being shot and killed. So there was reading those stories. The other thing that triggered my emotion was finding out that I didn't get a listing, not because I wasn't Black, but because I wasn't of a certain nationality, which is fine. You know, people like to work with their own. I'm not really tripping on that, but yet and still it was okay. Because of who I am, I didn't get the listing. But then to find out that I couldn't sit in open house specifically because this person didn't want Black representation, I broke down and I cried uncontrollably. And that's not me. And it's life is hard enough as it is. Being a real estate agent working on commission, as we all know, is hard enough as it is.
We're financial daredevils.
Right. You know, if you want to disqualify me because I didn't, you know, my marketing materials weren't up to par, or, you know, we weren't vibing, you know, conversationally, fine. But just because of a picture and what I look like, that, you know, that is in the root of the stuff we deal with on a daily basis in this country. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but there was a point in time where I questioned whether or not I should even have my picture on my marketing for that reason.
I actually had a point in my career. It was, do you or do you not?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, thanks for everybody sharing everything, but I know how difficult it is, you know, as you said, not generally being emotional about stuff, sharing that, you know, the raw emotion with us, because it's really very impactful, and I appreciate that authenticity is very impactful.
Thank you. And it, you know, with, I still want to tap into what we talked about, again, some of the other nuances of our daily life and job. However, I'll throw this question out to the audience just to think for yourself. You know, I imagine being told by your client that, and then you have to relay that to your colleague, particularly someone that you already respect. And listen, it can happen to us as Black agents if they have something against another ethnicity, you know, you never know, but you have to start to think, how do I handle myself if I am thrust in the middle of really, that's a conversation that falls under the auspice of the fair housing protection, and you start to get in dangerous territory. How do we handle that? And the more we're having these conversations, and whether you're, it doesn't matter if you're a Black agent or not a Black agent, it's about, as an agent in real estate, understanding the standards that we're held to. You actually almost have to have pre-game plan. If someone says this, this is how I handle it. So if and when it shows up, and sadly, we're at a time still in this country, it will show up at some point in your career. If you stay in it long enough, you'll probably A, get a call about a possible lawsuit if you're successful and you've sold enough homes, and B, someone will ask or say something that you know is a violation. And then just think about, you know, how do you handle that? But I want to, since you're there, I want to tap back into, again, like, so open house, let's just say, let's pivot it to showing property, because I didn't think about this until you said it. So what happens when you show property? I'm into, Tanya, you know, especially if it has an alarm on it. Let's talk about the properties with alarms.
That's exactly where I was going. And there is a particular experience I had where, you know, my client was my aunt. We were out looking at properties and the alarm goes off. I had the alarm code, but the alarm, you know, did everything I needed to, but the alarm went off. And so, you know, in most cases, you're like, okay, let's just get this shut off and move along. Well, I had to instruct my aunt to, hey, do me a favor, just walk through the house. You know, we'll talk about it after, but I'm going to stand outside in the event that the police show up, because I don't want to have it to be a situation where they come in guns blazing because I appear to be a threat and there's a misunderstanding and there's a loss of life. Not because it's a burglary, but it's a Black man in a neighborhood that, quote unquote, shouldn't be there.
It's an interaction that you don't want.
I just don't want. And let me be crystal clear to everybody that's on this call. I'm not saying all police are bad, so please don't walk away with this. But, you know, as a Black man in this country, I understand there's certain conditions that and rules that we have to adhere to in our daily life. And what I always tell people is, no, cops are not all bad, but unfortunately, because of things that go on, I can't assume they're all good. And until I actually have a conversation with that police officer, I don't know what mood he's in.
Yeah. Or the neighbors or anything. I mean, I don't know, Tanya or Anthony, if that's happened to you. I was sharing with Rashad that even in my career, I remember that's worse than the bright lights behind your car. When the alarm goes off and you just start thinking, how am I going to explain? You start looking, you know, luckily we're dressed appropriately. You get your business card ready and you know it's probably 3 seconds to explain that you belong there. That's a fear that I can't even equate it to anything. Tanya, has that happened to you? Anthony, has that happened to you? I want to pull you guys in on that. That has happened?
It's never happened to me personally, and yet the fear of even being in the driveway with African-American buyers, getting the key out of the Supra box and proceeding to open the front door may look extremely suspicious to someone who doesn't know that I'm a real estate agent showing buyers property. So it's always constantly in the back of your head, setting the tone and pace for what happens next.
You're always looking around, and it seems really basic. And I don't think any of us, you know, we're not whiny people, right? This is just, hey, you probably never thought about something so simple. right? That we have to think about, and it's not a one-off. It's not a one-off. You know, if we assemble probably 100, 1,000 colleagues that look like us, would start to have a similarity of experience or concern. Like right now, nothing has to happen for us to still be concerned about. Everything has to be super, super above board because you don't want to be in that situation. Here's why we share it. Again, awareness and sensitivity, right? Awareness and sensitivity. If through, you know, the really transparent and brave, really sharing, because when we go through these things, most of us just go through it and we dust off and move on, right? And you deal with it. But by sharing, if just one person that hears this conversation at least goes, huh, wow, you know, what can I do to change that? Or at least being mindful and understanding from a leadership situation in coaches, brokers, team leaders, what have you. Again, obviously, the basic go door knock is not the same, maybe, for us. So maybe it's, you know, to be able to understand, it's not about not wanting to do things or not about being lazy or whining or whatever adjective you want to put on it, but about it's some real concerns out here, right? Now we are going to leave, I see some questions and comments in the chat, so we're really going to try to kind of involve everyone in that and discuss maybe some questions you guys have brought up. Before I do that though, Tanya, I wanted to remind you of one other thing we spoke about. That we talked about yesterday. And what we spoke about is the challenge of being recognized for opportunities. Or what it feels like to not be recognized for opportunities, perhaps when we've earned it. And if you're looking for the answer, the only thing that looks like it might be the issue is, man.
Right.
So, Tanya, you want to share your
And before I chime in to say about a different situation, all of us here, we definitely, and I'm sure people on the call, we don't let race put us in a box and stop us from doing what needs to be done and continuing to live out our dreams. You know, even as as a realtor, how you view yourself and how you handle your race and situations, it will take you further in life. Situations that you build on and experiences it's only there to help you grow. And so with that, I was sharing with Mahogany that a while back, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I absolutely love Keller Williams. And I want to grow with the company. And I was thinking of joining the ALC. But I knew that that was some opportunity that you had to be invited to. So I would, in the back of my mind, I was like waiting to see if anyone would ask me or, just come talk to me about it. But it never happened. Now, let me just pull back and say that this is not a ploy to be on an ALC, because people who know me on this call at this point, they know that I am way overcommitted to so many different things.
Yes, you are.
I sit on a whole lot of executive boards, from the Pasadena Community Endowment to the Links organization, Jack and Jill, sorority, and now with our elect Vice President Kamala Harris, my sorority sister and Link sister, who we invited her into our our fold this year. So I'm very happy about that. So I'm overcommitted there as well at this point. So I went back and I spoke to some of the people at our office, and I said, well, what's really going on with the ALC? And I was told that, well, the reason why you probably wasn't invited in is because you don't volunteer. And I said, volunteer? I not only volunteer my time and money to anything. Besides, maybe haven't been to Thank a Soldier, putting boxes in together. However, I give so much to everything that I do. So that was just kind of interesting. And Mahogany and I had that conversation, not to put a bad spin on anything, but it was about being invited. And when I felt like I was excluded, where I, as a leader, not only in the community from the West Side, from Pasadena, that I can contribute so much if I'm sitting around the table and have the opportunity to voice my opinion to help the organization grow and let people think a little differently. And that's the thing when it comes to Keller Williams is all inclusive. And we just need to be inclusive overall and sometimes start at home.
I absolutely agree. And what we further discuss, because, real estate, again, is interesting, even with a major company, #1 in the world, all across the world, sidebar, we're still independently owned, operated offices, it's different personalities, but also while it's not on a huge billboard, what the opportunities are, the information is there. And for those agents, and you didn't say this, but I'm gonna remind you of it because it's powerful what you said to me. You have your own thing and you represent leadership in other ways, but there's probably an agent that looks like us who is interested in being beyond just a real estate agent, and they haven't been invited, they feel excluded, and they don't know that it's okay to raise your hand or raise the question. That's the whole point when we talked about this, was about, not about accusations or not about, this is horrible, but about if you feel like you have the skills, the background, and you are interested in growing yourself, rather through leadership or business-wise or what have you, we're very fortunate. Keller Williams is a company that allows you to step into your own growth and greatness. Sometimes, though, you have to knock on the door.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to knock the door totally down in order to let people know that you're here.
Absolutely. So funny, when we first started just talking about putting this together, as again, I want to remind you, this is the commercial, first in a series. We're going to continue the dialogue because this is not enough time, right? The one thing that we wanted to do differently than, say, maybe other webinars or conversations is really allow our audience, who's spent a good bit of time just really listening and taking it in, to share if you have a question or a comment, right, in the last, 10 minutes we have together, and let's bring you into the dialogue, because true dialogue is everyone, right, sharing their ideas or even questions. There is one last kind of open-ended question, not really a poll question, but something to think about, which would be really great if you had an aha or a spirit to answer it, is taking what we've discussed and even what you see of the world, where do you see matters of social equity? And that word is very important, equity, in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 5 years. What do you see in general in the world, but also because I don't know if everyone on here is a real estate professional or a real estate professional within Keller Williams, but certainly there are a large amount of us as are. So as Tanya said, start at home. What do you see? What do you see? Are you hopeful? Right? How do you see your role? Whatever you want to share, I'm going to look and see if anyone, chimes in. I did see very interesting, and I'll throw it out to the panel because I think it was good. I can't find the question, but I do remember that a brand new agent shared that she was very reluctant to do door knocking and things like that at the beginning. Like, of course, because that's one of the first things they tell you. So if someone new, they say, I'm not doing that, I don't feel safe, or it's not my thing, what would you guys recommend getting started, right? Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself if yourself was new? Yeah. Anybody can chime in.
Sure, I'll chime in.
Please do.
Okay, so it's so funny that I think it was Rashad who had mentioned, contemplating how do I market myself as a Black agent? Do I include my photo? Do I not include my photo? Right? Now we have progressed to a day in which, because of social media, you are your business, and your face is you, and that you is your business. So it is really about marketing who you are to the masses and attracting those who value what you value in a person, in an agent, and the services that you provide. So it's really about creating an opportunity for people to see more than just a face and then making biased opinions on that face. I know an agent out of Corona, Will Higgins, and we've had several conversations about marketing, and he's big on social media and Instagram. And we were talking specifically about, marketing with your image versus not your image. And he said, look, I want to put myself out there so I know that the people who respond to me want to work with me. And I thought that was a really powerful way to consider your business. And as a new agent, I would say to expand on putting you and yourself and your face out there, maybe consider working with first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers tend to be younger, number one, and we know that, our millennial generation are less prejudiced against all different types of people than Gen Ys, Gen Xers, and baby boomers. So there's this, they have a tendency as a generation to already look past color and look past orientation and things of that nature. So I think that would be a really comfortable segment to consider putting the entire you in front of, and then welcoming those people who respond and feeling open and free and at ease to do business.
Thank you for that. Tanya, did you want to chime in on that?
Actually, he said it pretty well. But
he said it pretty awesome.
Yeah. My thing is, many times we get hung up on who doesn't want to work with us. And the truth of the matter is,
you just said
that
something.
person that really don't want to work with you, you really don't want to work with them. For the simple fact, and you have to thank the gods above that you just dodged the bullet.
You know what? That's
how I look at it. That's exactly
gold.
how I look at
That's
it.
gold, whether for new agents or those of us that have been in the game long enough, regardless of background or ethnicity. You're right. You don't want to try to tie yourself to someone who doesn't want to work with you. Go where we're celebrated, not tolerated. Here's was a good question, I thought. And the first thing, I don't want to end this without shouting out one of our task force members, Marcy. She works so hard behind the scenes with us and is really passionate about creating a world that is equitable for all of us. And she threw this out there. So thank you, Marcy. Love you for that. What do you guys think 2 or 3 things that as individual agents, they can do to reach out and lift up, you know, Black and brown sisters and brothers in this business. And I want to start first on your thoughts, Rashad, because I asked you when we talked, if people only walked away from your share with one real main point and understanding, what would it be? And I think that ties into the answer you told me, ties into that question. What would be the one thing?
If people are on this, first of all, everyone that showed up, thank you. And it's my belief that everyone that's on this webinar, they either get it or are starting to get it, and you know, they're on the right side of making things accurate, or better, I should say. If it were solely up to me, quite honestly, this is the easy part. Talking to people that are on your side and get the perspective that you get. I would welcome, me personally, I'd welcome having, I think we have 70 something people on this call now. I'd welcome 70 people to be on this call that were on the other side of it, because that's where the real work starts. I do believe there, you hear people say, well, I didn't know. I had no idea. And with everything that's gone on in 2020, if that's still your company line, you're choosing not to know. And so that's not something I'm buying. I'd much rather talk to people that don't get it and hopefully open their eyes and moving forward that way, because I think that's going to be the biggest move, pushing the needle forward, as we go forward.
Awesome. Actually, that's an outstanding bow on our conversation. I will end with, again, a thank you. The last question, and I'll answer it, someone had posted was, what as Black agents or what as agents are we doing to inform and educate the Black communities, right, about financial wealth of real estate and how that's all connected. You're going to be very excited because that's been the conversation of the Social Equity Task Force. We, in partnership with the region, have plans for 2021 to actually connect to the communities that we serve, that we're a part of, and that we know exist in this city. And we're going to begin as real estate professionals to educate the community. So that is coming. And what I'll say is, when you see that, raise your hand, because many hands are needed for the work. Thank you everyone for your 90 minutes with us today. Please look forward to the next conversation in 2021. This has shown us without a doubt, this is a conversation that people are excited about. So we thank you, take great care, and stay out the streets.
Very much.